Lyra was a young alien girl with a gentle heart and quiet nature. Her life had never been easy, but after her father passed away, things became much worse. She lived with her stepmother, a cold, unkind woman who treated Lyra like a burden. Lyra tried her best to obey her stepmother, hoping that if she was good, her stepmother might show her a bit of kindness. But kindness never came. Every day, her stepmother would order her to do all the housework while she relaxed or entertained her friends. Lyra would scrub the floors, cook meals, and clean up after everyone without a word of thanks. She felt like a ghost in her own home, invisible and unwanted. Still, Lyra kept a small flame of hope alive in her heart. Maybe one day, things would get better. Maybe her stepmother would see her as family. But one dark evening, Lyra's life took a terrifying turn. Her stepmother called her into the main room. The house was silent, and Lyra felt a chill run down her spine as she entered. In the room stood a group of rough-looking alien traders with cold, hungry eyes. Her stepmother's face held no warmth, just a hard, calculating look. Without warning, her stepmother grabbed Lyra's arm and shoved her forward. "Here she is," she said, her voice colder than Lyra had ever heard it. "Take her and give me the payment we agreed on." Lyra's heart dropped. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Wait, what's happening?" she stammered, looking at her stepmother with wide, frightened eyes. "What are you doing?" But her stepmother just sneered. "I'm selling you, Lyra. You're nothing but trouble and a waste of space. These traders are going to take you far away, and I'll never have to see you again." The traders grabbed Lyra by the arms, ignoring her struggles and pleas. Her stepmother turned away, already counting the money she had received for selling Lyra. She didn't look back once. As the traders pulled Lyra out of the house, she felt a rush of despair unlike anything she had ever known. Her only family had sold her like an object, treating her as if she had no worth at all. She felt helpless, trapped in a nightmare that was all too real. The traders took her to their ship, where they locked her in a small dark cell. The walls were cold, and the air was thick with the smell of metal and oil. Lyra huddled in a corner, her heart pounding with fear. She didn't know where they were taking her, but she knew it wouldn't be anywhere good. Days turned into weeks as she traveled with the traders, who treated her with no kindness. They only spoke to give her orders, forcing her to work and clean on the ship while they barked at her to move faster. Lyra grew tired, hungry, and weak, but they didn't care. To them, she was just a slave. During these long, lonely days, Lyra often thought back to her home, to the times before her father had died. She remembered his gentle smile, the way he would tell her stories about stars and distant planets. She wished he were here now, that he could somehow save her from this nightmare. But her father was gone, and she was truly alone. Yet even in the darkness, Lyra kept a small spark of hope. She told herself that she would survive, no matter what. She would find a way to escape, to be free again. She wouldn't let her stepmother or these cruel traders break her spirit. One day, while cleaning the main deck, Lyra overheard the traders talking about selling her again. They planned to take her to a far-off planet, where she would be sold to someone who needed cheap labor. Lyra's heart raced as she listened. She realized her time was running out. If she didn't escape soon, she might never get another chance. But how could she escape from these cruel traders? She had no friends, no allies, and nowhere to run. Still, she clung to hope, praying that somehow a miracle would come. Little did she know that her silent wish was about to be answered. Somewhere out in the stars, an old human soldier was traveling through space, searching for peace after a lifetime of war. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to cross paths with a young, desperate alien girl in need of a hero. And that hero was about to change her life forever. Captain John Hayes was an old human soldier, known for his bravery and strength in the many wars he had fought. But those days were behind him now. After years of battle and bloodshed, John had left the military, searching for a quiet life among the stars. He traveled alone, his spaceship a simple but sturdy one, carrying only the essentials and his memories. One evening, as he rested on a small space station far from any main trade route, he overheard a conversation between two rough-looking alien traders. They sat at a nearby table, talking in low voices, but John's trained ears picked up their words clearly. "I don't know why we took that little alien girl," one trader grumbled. "She's too quiet, too weak. Not much use to us." The other trader snickered. "She'll be useful once we sell her off to the right buyer. Some planets pay well for alien labor. She's just a kid, but who cares? Profit is profit." John's heart sank. He knew what they were talking about. A slave. The thought made him angry. He had seen enough pain and cruelty in his life, and he had vowed never to ignore it again. Quietly, he finished his drink and left the bar, his mind racing. He couldn't ignore this. He had to find a way to help that girl. But he knew he had to be careful. The traders were dangerous, and he was only one man. If he tried to fight them head-on, he would put both himself and the girl at risk. After a few moments of thought, John began to form a plan. He would need to be smart and quick. First, he needed to locate the girl. He followed the traders as they left the bar, keeping his distance, careful not to be seen. They led him to the docking bay, where their large cargo ship sat in a shadowed corner. John observed from a distance, studying the ship and its surroundings. He noted the guards at the entrance and the layout of the docking bay. He had been in hundreds of missions during his time as a soldier, and he knew how to stay hidden and avoid detection. His plan would have to be silent and swift. For the next day, John watched the traders' movements. He noticed they took the girl out of her cell on the ship once in a while, forcing her to do small tasks around the docking bay. She looked thin and tired, her eyes filled with sadness. But John also saw a spark of determination in her. The girl wasn't broken, not yet. That gave him hope. Once he understood the trader's routine, John prepared himself. He gathered a few supplies from his ship, a small energy cutter, a stun device, and some food and water for the girl. He packed them carefully, keeping his movements quiet and steady. Tonight, he would make his move. As the station grew quiet and most travelers settled down for the night, John slipped out of his ship and headed toward the trader's cargo ship. The guards at the entrance were dozing off, not expecting any trouble. John crept past them, moving like a shadow, and made his way inside. He carefully navigated the dark hallways, following the faint sounds of movement until he found the holding cells. Through the bars, he could see the girl sitting on the cold floor, her head resting on her knees. She looked exhausted but alert, her eyes widening as she spotted him. "She," John whispered, holding a finger to his lips. "I'm here to help you. Stay quiet, and I'll get you out of here." The girl nodded, her eyes full of hope and fear. John quickly used his energy cutter to unlock the cell door, and the bars slid open with a soft click. He handed her a small flask of water, and she drank gratefully, her hands trembling slightly. "Can you walk?" he asked softly. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Thank you for helping me." John gave her a reassuring nod. "We're not out yet. Stay close and do exactly as I say." Together, they moved through the hallways, avoiding the few remaining guards. They made their way toward the exit, but as they reached the docking bay, one of the guards spotted them. Before he could sound the alarm, John swiftly used his stun device, knocking the guard out cold. They hurried outside, reaching John's ship just as the trader's alarm blared through the docking bay. John quickly helped the girl inside and started the engine, speeding away from the station before the traders could follow. As the stars blurred past them, the girl looked at John with a mix of relief and gratitude. For the first time, she felt safe, knowing this human soldier had risked everything to rescue her. John glanced back at her, offering a small smile. "You're safe now," he said. "Let's get you away from here." And with that, their journey to freedom had just begun. John Hayes, the old human soldier, had saved Lyra from the cruel traders, but their troubles were far from over. The traders weren't the type to let a slave escape without a fight. As John's ship sped through space, he kept checking the radar, hoping the traders wouldn't be able to track them. Lyra sat quietly beside him, clutching a small blanket he had given her for warmth. She was still scared, her eyes wide and her body tense, but she trusted John. He had been her only hope, her brave rescuer. She had never met a human before, and to her, John seemed strong and kind, unlike anyone she'd known. Suddenly, a loud beep filled the cabin. John's radar lit up, showing two fast-moving ships coming up behind them. The traders had found them. "Hang on, Lyra," John said, gripping the controls tightly. "This might get rough." Lyra nodded, fear shining in her eyes. She held onto the seat, bracing herself as John made the ship swerve and dodge, trying to lose their pursuers. The traders' ships fired bright beams of energy, each one just barely missing them. Lyra could feel the ship shaking with every turn and twist, and her heart pounded in her chest. The traders were relentless, determined to capture Lyra and punish John for taking her. John's hands moved quickly over the controls, his eyes focused and sharp. Years of military training came back to him as he steered the ship through dangerous asteroid fields and tight turns, hoping to escape. But the traders weren't giving up. They kept closing in, their ships faster and newer than John's old vessel. He knew he couldn't keep dodging forever. They needed a plan, and they needed one fast. John glanced at Lyra, who was watching him with a mix of fear and trust. He couldn't let her down. He took a deep breath, his mind racing. "Listen, Lyra," he said, keeping his voice calm. "We're going to have to fight back. I'll need your help." Lyra nodded bravely, though her hands were shaking. "Tell me what to do." John reached for a small control panel and pointed to a button. "When I say now, press this button. It will release a burst of energy from the ship's engines. It'll only work once, so we have to time it perfectly." Lyra looked at the button and then back at John. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I understand." As the traders' ships closed in, John steered toward a thick cloud of space debris. The traders followed, confident they had him trapped. But John was ready. He counted down silently, his eyes sharp and focused. "Now," he shouted. Lyra pressed the button, and the ship's engines roared to life, sending a powerful burst of energy out behind them. The sudden burst of speed sent John's ship flying forward, just as the traders' ships entered the cloud of debris. The burst created a shockwave, scattering the debris and slamming into the traders' ships, forcing them to swerve and lose control. One of the traders' ships crashed into a large asteroid, exploding in a flash of light. The other ship barely escaped, spinning wildly before it steadied itself. But by the time the remaining ship got back on track, John and Lyra were already far ahead. Lyra looked at John, her face filled with relief and amazement. "You did it," she said, her voice filled with wonder. John gave her a small smile. "We did it, Lyra. That was your timing. You were brave." Lyra felt a warm feeling in her chest. No one had ever called her brave before. She smiled back, her fear slowly melting away. But John knew they couldn't relax just yet. There was still one trader ship left, and he could see it following them on the radar. They needed to find a safe place to hide until it gave up. He scanned the area and spotted a small, hidden moon nearby. It wasn't on most maps, just a quiet, rocky place where they could land and wait. John set a course and guided the ship down, landing it carefully on the moon's surface. Once they were safe on the moon, John shut down the ship's engines to avoid detection. The cabin was quiet, with only the soft hum of the ship. He looked over at Lyra, who was now breathing more easily, her face relaxed for the first time. "You were amazing out there," John said, giving her a reassuring nod. "We'll stay here for a while. Let them pass. They won't find us here." Lyra nodded, feeling safe and grateful. She couldn't believe how lucky she was to have found someone like John, someone who was willing to risk everything to help her. As they sat together on the quiet moon, Lyra felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was truly free. After escaping the traders, John and Lyra remained on the hidden moon. It was a lonely, rocky place with gray skies and quiet winds, but here they were safe, away from anyone who might harm them. Lyra finally felt like she could breathe without fear, yet the weight of everything that had happened still pressed on her heart. As they rested in John's ship, Lyra stayed close to a corner, looking small and unsure. She had been through so much, and while she trusted John, she wasn't used to feeling safe. Her life had been filled with pain, betrayal, and fear. Trust was something she had never learned. John noticed this, and he knew she needed time. He didn't push her to talk or explain anything. Instead, he treated her with kindness and patience. He offered her food and water, making sure she ate enough to gain her strength back. He even gave her a soft blanket from his own cabin, hoping it would help her feel warm and cared for. Over the next few days, John and Lyra settled into a gentle routine. John would spend part of each day checking the radar to ensure the traders weren't near, while Lyra rested and explored the ship's small spaces. Sometimes she watched John as he worked, her eyes curious but silent. John understood that Lyra needed to feel safe before she could open up. One evening, as they sat together in the ship's small kitchen, John decided to tell her a bit about himself, hoping it would make her feel more comfortable. "You know, I've seen a lot in my time," he said, his voice calm and soft. "I was a soldier for many years. I fought in battles, traveled to many planets, met all kinds of people and aliens. But after so much fighting, I realized something. Peace is worth more than any victory." Lyra listened quietly, her eyes focused on him. She had never heard anyone talk like this before. Her life had been filled with survival and struggle, but John's words gave her a small glimpse of something different. "Why did you help me?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. John looked at her kindly. "Because no one deserves to be treated like a slave," he said simply. "When I saw those traders, I knew I couldn't just walk away. You deserve freedom, Lyra. Everyone does." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. No one had ever told her she deserved anything good. She had always felt like a burden, someone to be discarded and forgotten. Hearing John's words felt like a gentle light in the darkness, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Slowly, over the next few days, Lyra began to open up. She told John bits and pieces of her life, her father, who had once been kind and loving, and her cruel stepmother, who had sold her to the traders without a second thought. John listened patiently, never interrupting, letting her share as much or as little as she wanted. One evening, as she shared a painful memory, John placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry for everything you've been through, Lyra," he said, "but you're safe now. No one will hurt you here." Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and trust. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, with John's help, she could heal from her past. She didn't have to carry the weight of fear and pain alone anymore. As time passed, John taught Lyra basic skills, like how to read maps, check the ship's controls, and understand the radar. He wanted her to be self-sufficient, to feel confident and capable. Lyra was eager to learn, and she found herself feeling stronger each day. Slowly, she started to smile, a soft, hesitant smile that John noticed with warmth. One day, while they were sharing a simple meal, Lyra asked, "Do you think maybe I could help others too, like you helped me?" John smiled, nodding. "I think you'd be great at it. You understand what it feels like to be alone, to be hurt. And that makes you strong, Lyra. Stronger than you know." Lyra's heart swelled with pride. She had never thought of herself as strong, but John's words made her feel like she could do anything. For the first time in her life, she felt like she had a purpose, a future that could be filled with something other than fear. As they prepared to leave the hidden moon and continue their journey, Lyra felt ready. She still had fears, memories that haunted her, but she wasn't alone anymore. She had John, and she had a new hope burning inside her. The hidden moon faded behind them as their ship soared through the stars. Lyra looked out at the vastness of space, feeling a strange mix of wonder and excitement. With John by her side, she was no longer the scared, lost girl who had been sold and betrayed. She was someone new, someone who was learning to trust, to heal, and maybe, one day, to help others find their freedom too. And with that thought, Lyra's journey to a brighter future began. As their journey continued, John and Lyra grew closer each day. Though they were very different, an old human soldier and a young alien girl, they had developed a bond that felt unbreakable. Both had seen pain and loneliness, but now they had found something they hadn't expected: family. John took his role as Lyra's protector seriously, but he treated her as more than just someone to save. He taught her about the stars, the controls of the ship, and even told her stories from his military days. Lyra loved listening to his stories, her eyes wide with wonder as he described battles, distant planets, and friendships he formed with other soldiers. One night, after a long day of travel, John noticed that Lyra seemed troubled. She kept glancing at the stars outside the window, her face thoughtful and sad. John decided it was time to talk. "Something on your mind?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. Lyra looked down, hesitating before she spoke. "I was just thinking about my father," she said quietly. "Before he died, he would tell me stories too. Stories about brave people, people like you." John's heart softened. He knew that losing her father had been one of the hardest things Lyra had faced. He understood the weight of grief, of missing someone deeply. "He must have been a good man," John said, his voice kind. Lyra nodded, a small smile appearing. "He was. He used to say that family means more than blood. He said family is the people who care for you, who protect you, and make you feel safe." John looked at her, understanding in his eyes. "Your father was right. And you know, Lyra, family isn't just something we're born into. It's something we choose. I think, maybe, we found a little family right here." Lyra felt warmth fill her chest. John's words touched her deeply, and for the first time in a long while, she felt the sense of belonging she had lost when her father died. She looked up at John, and with a shy smile, she said, "Thank you, John. I think of you as my family too." They both smiled, a silent understanding passing between them. It was a strong bond, something neither of them had expected but had grown naturally over time. They didn't need words to feel the connection between them. It was there, in every look and every act of kindness. Over the next few weeks, their bond only deepened. They continued to travel together, avoiding dangerous routes and staying away from populated areas where the traders might look for them. They found peace in the quiet of space, in the gentle hum of the ship, and in each other's company. One day, John decided to teach Lyra something special. He took out an old, worn knife he had carried with him through every battle. The blade was sharp, the handle smooth from years of use. It was more than a weapon to him. It was a symbol of his courage, his strength, and the life he had lived. "Lyra," he said, handing her the knife, "this is for you." Lyra looked at him, surprised. "For me?" she asked, taking the knife with careful hands. She looked down at it, feeling the weight of it, sensing its history. "Yes," John said. "I want you to have it. Not to fight, but to remind you that you're strong. Stronger than you know. And no matter what happens, you have the courage to face anything." Lyra felt tears well up in her eyes, but they were happy tears. She held the knife close, feeling the strength that came with it. John's gift meant more to her than words could express. It wasn't just a knife. It was a symbol of his trust in her, his belief that she could protect herself and face whatever came her way. "Thank you, John," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. "I'll keep it safe." John nodded, smiling proudly. I know you will. From that day on, Lyra wore the knife on her belt, feeling its reassuring weight as they traveled. It reminded her of John's belief in her, of the bond they shared. She was no longer the frightened girl who had been sold into slavery. She was becoming someone stronger, someone who could stand up for herself and for others. One evening, as they prepared for bed, Lyra looked at John and asked, "Do you think someday we could help others, like you helped me?" John thought for a moment, then nodded. "I think we could. There are many out there who need help, who need someone to stand up for them. And together, I think we'd make a good team." Lyra's face lit up with a hopeful smile. The idea of helping others, of using her new strength to make a difference, filled her with purpose. She knew that with John by her side, anything was possible. As they drifted off to sleep, Lyra held onto the knife and the sense of family she had found. She knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready, and she had someone who would always be by her side. And so their journey continued, two unlikely friends bound by trust, strength, and a shared dream of bringing hope to a galaxy that needed it. As John and Lyra traveled through space, a quiet tension filled the ship. They both sensed that their journey was about to face one last challenge. The traders who had once captured Lyra had not forgotten her, and John knew they would not stop hunting her until they were defeated. For the past few days, John had noticed strange readings on the radar. The traders were nearby, and they were closing in fast. "Lyra," John said, his voice serious, "we may have to face those traders again. They won't give up easily." Lyra nodded, her face determined. She was no longer the scared, helpless girl she had once been. With John's help, she had grown strong and brave. She placed a hand on the knife he had given her, feeling its reassuring weight. "I'm ready, John," she said firmly. "We can face them together." John felt a sense of pride. Lyra's courage inspired him, and he knew that whatever happened, they would face it as a team. Soon, the radar beeped loudly, showing two enemy ships coming straight toward them. John tightened his grip on the controls. "Here they come," he said. "Hold on tight." The traders' ships moved quickly, surrounding John's ship on both sides. They fired warning shots, beams of light streaking past the windows. John's ship shook with the impact, but he kept his cool. He had been in many battles before, and he knew how to stay calm under pressure. One of the traders appeared on the communication screen, a cruel smile on his face. "Old man, you've been a thorn in our side for too long," he sneered. "Hand over the girl, and we might let you live." John shook his head, his eyes steady. "You'll never get her back," he said firmly. "She's free now, and I won't let you harm her." The trader's face twisted in anger. "Then prepare to lose everything." With that, the battle began. The traders fired powerful blasts, each one aimed at disabling John's ship. John dodged as best as he could, his hands moving quickly over the controls. He guided the ship through sharp turns, weaving through asteroid fields to avoid the enemy shots. But the traders were persistent. They kept firing, each shot coming closer to hitting their target. Lyra watched John, her heart racing, but she didn't let fear take over. She remembered all that John had taught her, and she knew she had to stay strong. "Lyra," John said, glancing at her, "I need you to help me with the weapons. Aim at their engines. If we can disable one of their ships, it'll give us a chance." Lyra nodded, moving to the weapons control. Her hands trembled slightly, but she took a deep breath, focusing on the task. She aimed carefully, targeting the nearest trader ship's engine, and fired. The blast hit its mark, causing the trader ship to swerve wildly as smoke poured from its engine. "Good shot," John called, a spark of hope in his voice. But the second trader ship was still coming toward them, firing even faster now. John knew they needed a plan to turn the battle in their favor. He quickly thought of a risky move, one that might just give them the upper hand. "Lyra, I'm going to do something daring. Hold on tight, and be ready to fire again. John steered the ship directly toward the second trader, speeding up as fast as the old ship could go. The trader ship moved forward, expecting to overpower them. But just before they were about to collide, John pulled up, narrowly missing the trader's ship and causing it to lose control. "Now, Lyra," he shouted. Lyra fired again, her blast hitting the second trader ship's weapons. The impact caused a small explosion, leaving the ship powerless and drifting in space. Both trader ships were now damaged, unable to pursue or fight back. Realizing they had lost, the trader on the communication screen appeared again, furious but defeated. "This isn't over," he spat. "We'll find you both, no matter where you go." John looked at him calmly. "You can try," he replied, "but you'll never take Lyra from me. She's free, and that's how she'll stay." With that, John cut the communication, and the damaged trader ships floated helplessly in space. He and Lyra had won. As the traders drifted away, John and Lyra allowed themselves a moment to breathe. The danger was gone, at least for now, and they were safe again. Lyra looked at John, her eyes filled with gratitude and admiration. "Thank you, John," she said, her voice full of emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you." John smiled, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You were brave, Lyra. I'm proud of you." Lyra smiled back, feeling stronger than ever. The final fight had proven to her that she was no longer the frightened girl she had once been. She was free, strong, and ready to face whatever came next. Together, they set their course for new adventures, knowing that as long as they had each other, they could overcome anything. After their victory, the stars seemed brighter than ever. John and Lyra sat in the cockpit of the ship, watching as the planets and moons passed by. The battle was behind them now, and the danger was over. They had won their freedom, but what came next was a question neither of them had answered yet. John glanced at Lyra, who was staring out the window, her eyes lost in thought. She had changed so much since they first met. The scared girl who had been sold into slavery was gone, replaced by a strong and confident young woman who had fought beside him and helped bring down the traitors. John smiled to himself. He had always been a soldier, but now he was something more: a protector, a mentor, and maybe even a friend. "Lyra," he said softly, breaking the silence. "What are you thinking?" Lyra turned to him, her face thoughtful. "I was just thinking about the future," she said, her voice quiet but hopeful. "What will we do now? Where do we go from here?" John nodded, understanding the weight of her question. "We can go anywhere you want, Lyra. The galaxy is huge, and we're free to explore it however we choose. But wherever we go, we do it together. No more running, no more hiding." Lyra smiled at the thought. For the first time, she felt the excitement of possibility. She had never imagined a future where she wasn't in fear, but now, with John by her side, that future seemed full of hope. "We could help others too," she said, her voice growing stronger. "There are still people who need help, who are stuck in situations like I was. Maybe we could find them, protect them, and give them a chance to be free." John looked at her with pride. "I think that's a great idea, Lyra. We've already done it once, and we can do it again. We've got the skills, the ship, and most importantly, the heart to help people who are suffering." Lyra nodded, feeling a new sense of purpose inside her. She wasn't just someone who had been rescued. She was someone who could rescue others, who could make a real difference in the galaxy. She turned back to the window, watching the stars as they drifted past, feeling the weight of her decision. This was the future she wanted, a life full of meaning, not just survival. As the days passed, John and Lyra continued their journey. They stopped on different planets, visiting small towns and villages where people lived in peace, far away from the wars and dangers of the galaxy. They helped those who needed it, fixing broken ships, finding lost travelers, and sometimes even standing up to local bullies who tried to take advantage of the weak. Everywhere they went, they were met with gratitude. and they found themselves growing stronger in their bond with each other. Lyra was amazed by how much she had changed. She used to be afraid of everything, but now she walked with confidence. She learned how to fly the ship, how to handle different alien languages, and even how to repair parts of the ship when something went wrong. John taught her everything he knew, and she soaked it all in, eager to learn. Together, they made a perfect team. One day, while they were on a peaceful planet, helping a family rebuild their home after a storm, Lyra looked at John with a serious expression. "John, I've been thinking," she said. "We've been through so much together, and I've learned so much from you. You're like family to me." John smiled, his heart warmed by her words. "You're like family to me too, Lyra," he said. "More than that, you're a friend, a partner, and you're stronger than you know." Lyra smiled back, her eyes sparkling with something more than just gratitude. "I feel like we're finally home. Not a place, but with each other." John nodded, feeling the same way. "I think you're right. We've created our own home, and it's wherever we are together." As the sun set on the peaceful planet, casting a warm golden light over the landscape, John and Lyra sat together, watching the sky. They had come so far from the days of fear and uncertainty. They had found freedom, purpose, and a new family in each other. The road ahead would be full of challenges, but they knew that as long as they had each other, they could face anything. Lyra leaned her head against John's shoulder, feeling safe and content. She had a new life now, one filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities. And no matter where the journey took them, she knew she would never be alone again. Together, they looked out at the stars, knowing that their future